Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to reading Aristotle's Politics. Today, we're still in Book One. We're doing Chapter 9, where he's going addressing the question of acquisition, which emerges not. He discussed around starting around Chapter 3. He said he's going to look at what makes the city, what makes the polis. He says an aggregation of households. There he goes on to define the household, and he says it's a series of relations, that of master slave, master servant, husband, wife, parent, child, um, and then goes on to chapters 4, 5, 6, and 7 to deal with the question of slavery and mastery. Um, at the end of that, he then goes on to the argument about discussion of whether the question of acquisition and acquisition of good. In chapter 8, we dealt with the question of acquisition, just beginning of focusing on the natural forms of acquisition, right, versus the unnatural forms of acquisition. That natural forms of acquisition tends to be seen as money making, through trade and commerce and interest making. That's the other thing, money making. So now let's turn on to chapter 9, where he left off, right? But there is another type of acquisitive art, which they call, and justly so, the art of getting goods, on account of which there is held to be no limit to wealth and property. So this is a kind of acquisition of getting goods that seems to have no limit, which is held to be no limit to wealth and property. It is considered by many to be one and the same as the sort of mentioned, what we mentioned before, right? The art of mentioning, because of the resemblance between them, of getting goods or getting things. Um, and while it is not the same as the one spoken of earlier, it is not far from it either. In other words, they're similar. In other words, the art of natural getting, of accomplishing getting things, versus this idea of this unlimited acquisition. They are similar. One is by nature, while the other is not by nature, but it resides rather through a certain experience and art. In other words, this idea, in other words, that it doesn't come from nature, but rather comes from experience, how we experience things, how we do things, and art, techne, a technique, a specific technique of doing things. Okay, banking and method, banking and interest mechanisms, insurance schemes, and things like this. These are it's all kind of like a project here. He's saying concerning this, let us take the following investigation as our beginning. Every possession has a double use. Both of these uses belong to it as such, but not in the same way. The one being proper and the other not proper to the thing. So therefore, there's two uses. One is a usage that is proper to the thing in question, and that is tied to it. It's concerned with it was made for that, and another usage of it it's useful, but it's not. It wasn't designed to be used this way. Okay. In other words, um, uh, uh, in the case of shoes, for example, one can wear them or one can trade them. Both of these are uses of shoes. One for the exchanging of shoes with someone who needs them in return for money or sustenance uses shoes as shoes, but not in respect to their proper use. In other words, i.e., the shoes are made to be worn. They're not made to be exchanged. In other words, they can be exchanged, but that's not the exchanging is not tied to why they were made. Okay, in that sense. For they did not come to be for the sake of exchange. Now that's the question. But they are, no. Hey, people, but they make lots of shoes because they know that I can't use it. I'm going to exchange it. So therefore, well, but the shoe itself, the thing itself, is not designed as a commodity in itself. It's a commodity because people want it. people might want it, but it's not and the purpose of a shoe is to be worn. It's not an instrument of investment, okay? Or like money. What you can do with it? You can't eat it. You can't do anything. It's not, doesn't worry. It's only a thing that's exchangeable, okay? Shoes are be worn, okay? This is the twofold nature of things, and it can be that. It was, they did not come into be for the sake of exchange. The same is the case concerning all possessions as well. For trading can be applied to all things. It arises in the first place from something that is according to nature. So trading is according to nature. Because why? He's going to say that trading in itself, even it's according to nature. Why? In the first place, it's something that is according to nature. The fact that human beings have either more or fewer things than what is required. Thus, it is also clear that commerce is not by nature part of the art of money making. Okay, this is a weird thing, and he's going to have a 42. This is that famous that kremetake in the pejorative sense. In other words, money making. Aristotle, he seems to use trade, metobitike, and commerce, kalepike, interchangeably. In normal Greek usage, the latter tends to be limited to local or retail, as distinct from long distance trade, right? But this tends to be uh, 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 long distance. This tends to be localized. But Aristotle's kind of mixing these two different words together as trade. In other words, he exchange. He uses this is that in retail trade. In other words, Aristotle says here that sorry, so make sure. So therefore, it's clear that commerce is not part of art. It simply does not a part. In other words, it's not. It can make money, but the purpose of it is I have too much. I have too much. You don't have enough. Therefore, okay, we you have something I want. I have something you want. So therefore, both of us get what we want in order to meet our needs, right? For it was necessary to make an exchange in order to obtain what they required. In other words, and so therefore, trade and exchange is therefore like this. In the first community, then, that is the household, it is evident that exchange has no function, but only when the community has already become numerous. In other words, exchange doesn't really happen. Everyone does everything in the household. Household exchange doesn't really happen in the household. It's between households. Okay, it's between households and between cities. Okay, this is the double sense. The thing I make I need I can't I need this. You have this. You make more of that. So therefore it's between households, and therefore it's a product when communities have already become numerous in size. In other words, for those in the household shared all the same things, while persons separated into different households needed many other things as well, and it was necessary to make transfers of these things according to their needs, as the barbarian nations still do through barter. So now this is that 43, again rendering, following Newman suggesting that kapileke is bartering. Um, for they exchange useful things for one another and nothing besides. In other words, they exchange useful things for one another and nothing besides. Giving, for example, wine and accepting grain, and similarly, for other such things. So therefore, they have something they need. Each side needs something. It's useful for them, and therefore they don't. They're not going to. If it's not useful for them, or they don't want it, they're not going to exchange for it. They exchange because it's something they need and they want it. And they want it because it's beneficial for them, or they need it, and that's just to meet some need or demand. Um, this sort of trade is not contrary to nature, nor is it any form of money making. Okay, this is Money making is that term. It's the pejorative sense of trade, of getting goods. For it existed in order to support natural sufficiency. In other words, the idea by sufficiency does it means that I have enough. I have enough in order to live my life, and not only live my life, but live it. Try to live it well. Try to live in a life that as a good life in that sense. Um, so therefore, in other words, trading points to a kind of sufficiency, a natural sufficiency. Therefore, this is that. Therefore, it's not contrary to nature when it doesn't seek to go beyond what is required for natural sufficiency. However, the latter arose from it. The latter type arose from it reasonably enough. For the assistance of foreigners became greater in the importing what they were in need, what they were in need of, and exporting what was in surplus. The use of money was necessary devised was derised. In other words, so therefore money was derised because they needed to, as trade and bartering became more as the as in other words, money emerged as a mechanism to make exchange easier. That's what he's saying here. Money making here is seen as a mechanism to making exchange earlier. Making is the most money in that sense is a kind of artificial construct. It's a thing created by nomos law in order to facilitate exchange, make it easier in that sense, and therefore, as he says, as the assistance of foreigners became greater in importing what they were in need of and exporting what there was in surplus, right? Money was derived. But these things necessary by nature are not, in each case, easily portable. So in other words, the thing in itself is not always easily portable, not easily movable. So therefore, what is done is that therefore this is hence with a view to exchange, they made a compact with one another to give the to give and accept something, which was itself one of the useful things and could be used flexibly to suited the needs of life, such as iron and silver, and whatever else may be of the sorts of the coinage, right? Silver, gold, iron, silver, gold, something that could be used as a means of exchange. In itself, there was value to it. It had some use, but also became useful for something else, right? At first, it was something with its value determined simply by size and weight, but eventually they impressed a mark on it in order to be relieved of having to measure it, and the mark being put on it as an indication of the amount. So therefore, at first, it was about the size, that it was valuable in itself. There was a value of in something in it itself and the size on it. But later, the mark was put on it, and the mark, instead of having to measure it, you had the mark, and that therefore that determined what it was. Okay, and that the mark of it, that becomes the value indicator. Okay, and that's indicates a social value, not the value of the actual item anymore. In other words, you don't have to weigh the item how it was to know what its value. The mark has the value, and therefore it's a socially constructed value in that sense. It's saying this authority is saying it's worth that much, and he that authority is backing it up. Once a supply of money came into being as a result of such necessary exchange, then the other kinds of getting goods arose, that is, commerce. So once exchange arose, then the other kinds of goods arose, saying this kind of money making or exchange commerce. At first, this probably existed in a simple fashion, while later, through experience, it became more of a matter of art, the art of discerning what and how to trade in order to make the greatest profit. It is on this account that the art of getting goods is held to be particularly concerned with money, was making profit, right? And to have as its function the ability to discern what will provide a given amount of it. In other words, how much profit, how much money. And for it is held to be productive of wealth and goods. Indeed, they often define wealth as a given amount of money, since this is what money making or commerce is connected with. At other times, however, money seems to be something nonsensical and exists altogether by convention and in no way by nature, because when viewed by its users, it is worth nothing and is not useful with a view to any of the necessary things. And it will often happen that one who is wealthy in money will go in want of necessary sustenance. Okay, so this is like 44 note. This is about a note here, 44. Um, Now there's a play on words here between the words of he is playing on the words of money, which is nomasia, and convention, which is nomos. Right? He's playing on this double sense of this for a reason. He's playing on the double sense of that meaning of that word, very specific between money and convention, right? And he gives this thing about the man who, again, this is a very famous reference, right? There's a problem here is um, that money in itself, gold, the means of exchange, may not be able to meet. You can't sustain yourself. I can't eat it. Paper, money, paper. You can burn it, but what good is it? You can't eat it. You can't do anything with it. Gold can be melted to do something with it, but you still can't. It doesn't give any sustenance in that sense. Okay, so therefore, this is the funny thing. It says money will go in want of necessary. Those who really only want wealth, well, see, it would be absurd if wealth were something one could have in abundance and die from starvation, like the Midas of the fable, when everything set before him turned into gold on account of the greediness of his prayer. Right. Now, 45, this is Midas' famous that story. We all know the story about Midas, right? Midas made a promise. In fact, remember, the god he said, I wish everything I can touch would turn to gold. The Dionysus grants him that wish. Dionysus, the god of Eros and wine, uh, grants him his wish. What happens? Well, he dies. He dies of starvation because every time he touches food to eat it, it's gold. Okay, and he dies alone because everyone, when his daughter, his wife goes to touch him, he touches her, she turns to gold, and his children turn to gold. So, in other words, and no one wants to be with him. He hides away from him. Therefore, the metaphor here of Midas, who makes it because the greed of his wish, everything he wished, everything would turn to gold. So the God gave him that wish, and sorry, almost had interruption. um, Therefore, the example of Midas here is an interesting one. So there's, in other words, it's a warning. It's double-fold warning about that money making itself is not the end. Right? Let's continue here. What he says here. Hence, they seek another definition of wealth, and the getting of goods is correctly so. For getting of goods and the wealth that is according to nature is something different. This is the art of household management, and while the other is commerce, which is productive of wealth, not in every way, but through trafficking in goods, and is held to be connected with money, since money is the medium and goal of exchange. So the difference, and this is where he makes a clarification. Household management is about the getting of good, not the getting of goods. It's about the getting of goods in order to live in order for the household to survive, to do well, to prosper. Right? It is, in other words, it's the getting of goods is what? It's not about making money. It's not about getting wealth and this stuff. It's about getting what is necessary in order to live well, right? To live. Um, Now, and this is the kind of getting goods that is according to nature. In other words, it's seeking to it allows it has a very specific goal, it has a very specific limit towards what it's doing. It's not endless. It's not without end. It's not infinite. Um, it seeks so that we are able to have friends. It's the kind of wealth. It is the opposite of what happens to Midas. It is one that you don't die of starvation and you won't be alone. Okay. Um, it is this art. This is the art of household management. That the wealth that is according to nature, right? The art of getting goods in order so that you can live. Whereas the other one that has the art that of thing that you can get money to that you're able to have profit, continual profit. This is not by nature, right? In other words, in other words, the other is commerce, which is productive of wealth, but in wealth, not in every way. It's producing of wealth, but a certain kind of wealth. The wealth is of only the wealth of making money, profit, right? And is held to be connected with money, since money is the medium and the goal of exchange. And the wealth deriving from this sort of getting goods is indeed without limit. So now he says, now, for just as the art of medicine has no limit in respect to being healthy, right? Or any other of the arts in respect to its end, for this is what they particularly wish to accomplish. And so the art has a thing that you achieve the goal. There's no limit to that. Once you get your goal, you get the goal, right? Is getting, in other words, just as the art of medicine has no limit with respect to being healthy. Whether you're healthy, you're healthy, and there's no limit to being healthy. Okay, right? In respect to its end, in other words, or any other art in respect to its end. For this is what they particularly wish to accomplish. While there is a limit with respect to what exists for the sake of that end, what is that? Um, while there is a limit with respect to what exists for the sake of the end, since the end is a limit in the case of all of them. In other words, the goal is the self-end limit, right? He's saying that all the arts have to go. I'm going to build something. The thing I build is the end, and that's the limit. It is there. Once I've achieved what I wanted, that's the end. So therefore, all the arts have an end in that sense. So they have a limit in that sense. The end that they seek to do is a limit. So therefore, they're limitless in returns to how you should have it, how you should be, by being healthy, right? So this is what the point he's trying to make here. And so with this sort of goods getting, there is no limit with respect to the end, and the end is wealth of this sort and property and of this sort and property and money. So therefore, there's this commerce has no real end to it in that sense, because it's not for this. It is if it's all about just making money for this sort of goods. In other words, this is a very complex sentence here. Um, for with this sort of goods getting, there is no limit with respects to the end, and the end is wealth of this sort and property and money. But of household management, as distinguished from money making, there is a limit. For that is not the function of household management. In other words, the limit is that the household is living, is surviving, and the citizens and the people are prospering. Okay, they're happy. They're able to fulfill themselves. Thus, in one way, it appears necessary that there be a limit to all wealth. And this is what the point about. In other words, this is kind of like diminishing marginal returns. In other words, in other words, there's a limit to all things in a sense. You just can't have more and more and more and more doesn't give you the same benefit. Okay, this is this idea of the Pareto optimality point of a thing, and then after you keep on continuing, it gives you decreased benefit, use benefit. So so therefore, he says, appears necessary that there be a limit to all wealth. Yet, if we look at what actually occurs, we see the opposite happens. All who engage in money making increase their money without limit. The cause of this is the nearness to one another of these forms of good gettings. In other words, they're very close to each other. In other words, he says is the nearness. They're very similar to each other, and therefore they converge in the matter of use. The same thing being used in the case of either sort of goods getting. But the same property is being used, though not in the same respect. But in one case, the end is increase, and the other is something else. Now, this is a 46 has a note here, and this is in the Greek. He's going to be saying is reading Cheros Christos at 34 B 37 with the manuscript, rather than the conjectural use of that. And it uses the same property as Derntica. So he's staying with the manuscript. And again, he's very much always staying with the manuscript in the sense I noticed that Lord does not go with the alternative reading. For the same property is being used, although not in the same respect. But in one case, the end is increase, and while and the other something else. In other words, the end increase. Let's think about that for a second. What does he mean by that? For the same property is being used, right? This is something properties being used. However, one is gets the end of it is increasing. In other words, the end is increase, getting more and more of it, right? And the other is something else. It's being used to do something or deliver something. So some hold that this is the function of household management, and they proceed on the supposition that they should either preserve or increase without limit their holdings of money. So therefore, they think because things are very close to each other, these gettings of goods are very similar. Therefore, they're one of the same. And he says that no, that's not one of the same, but they intersect in that sense. The cause of this condition is that they are serious about living, but not about living well. And since that desire of theirs is without limit, they also desire what is productive of unlimited things. So this is the interesting point. He says the people who only care about wealth, right, the money making, this idea I'm going to get unlimited, they're concerned about living, surviving, but they're not concerned about living well. Because they focus, what he says, they desire what is productive of unlimited things. In other words, they're just since that desire of theirs is without limit, and they desire productive, unlimited things. Even those who aim also at living well will seek what conduces to body gratification. And since this too appears to be available in and through property, their pursuits are wholly connected with money making. And this is why the other form of the art of getting goods has arisen. In other words, that you need money, pleasure. I need pleasure. I need pleasure. I need body gratifications. And that therefore, this money making is a means to be conducive to gratify the needs of the body. For as gratification consists in excess, they seek a sort of art that produces the excess characteristic of gratification. And if they are unable to supply it through the getting of goods, they attempt this in some other fashion, using using each sort of capacity in a way not according to nature. So in other words, they'll take something and use every capacity. They want gratification. This is the man who wants gratification so much will use something that is designed to do one thing, will use it in another. Like this is the sexual reproduction. In other words, sex is for the purpose. The primary purpose of our sexual organs is so that we reproduce, right? Now, it also gives gratification. So if I only care about gratification, it's the using of my one's sexual organs in a way that cannot at all produce children. Okay, certain in other words, and therefore this is the kind of unnatural. This is the unnatural use of the thing he's saying here. That there's something and there's something unlimited about it in that sense, and it's also not conducive to well-being in that sense. He's trying to suggest here in that sense. Seek the sort of, in other words, excessive gratification, and they're unable to supply it through getting goods, they will attempt it in some other fashion, using each sort of capacity in a way not according to nature. For it belongs to, in other words, it belongs to courage to produce not goods, but confidence. Nor does this belong to the military nor does this belong to the military or medical arts, but it belongs to the former to produce victory and the later health. But all of these they make forms of money making, as if it were the end, and everything else had to march towards it. So, in other words, courage and things like that. The purpose of this is of courage is victory, right? And that the purpose of health is producing. I mean, the medical arts is produce health, but I use my ability to make health to make money, and therefore, you want my health. Okay, in other words, this is what they're doing: is that they're using everything. In other words, they use, but all of these they make forms of money making, as if they were the end of everything, and every else thing had to march. Everything had to march to it. So that's a very interesting point he says here. Now, concerning the unnecessary things of getting goods, then both as regarding what it is and why we are in need of it, enough has been said. And also concerning the necessary sort, that is different from the other, being household management according to nature, the sort connected with sustenance. And it is not without limit like the other, but it has a defining principle. So the purpose of the household is according to nature, the sort connected with, in other words, I'm getting things in order to provide sustenance and survival for the household, and that these kind of things have a limit. They're not without limit. There is the necessary. In other words, these are concerning the necessary sort. But concerning the unnecessary sort, then he said, and why they're in need of it. Now, enough of it. It's gratification. One reason why we do it is because there is a kind of semi-natural in the sense of exchange. Money emerges and stuff like that emerge because we have. I need something, you have it, and therefore we come exchange. This is a kind of semi-natural thing. But the idea of all of a sudden we making money for money's sake, this becomes kind of the unnatural aspect of it, and that this becomes an end in itself, and everything serves it now. That's the danger. It flips everything around. The purpose of being, in other words, the purpose of the medical arts is not making money. It's not being rich. It's healing people. Okay, in other words, that's the point he's trying to make. That therefore the arts are done. The purpose of an art or a thing, it's designed to deliver or produce the thing that it's designed to do. It is not. Its purpose is not to make money. And that's also true about the idea of the household manager in a sense. The purpose of the household manager is about governing the household so that it's living well. It's living, it's meeting the needs to live, and also helping those in it live well. And that's the whole point. Well, this is where we end for the chapter 9. I'm going to stop here. If you have any comments or questions, you please put them below. I will, if I see them, when I see them, I will respond to them. Like what you see, if you don't like it, say say why in the thing you don't like it. Share with a friend. Pass it on social media. You can follow me on social media there. You can subscribe here, or again, you follow me on social media to see what I do. And understand I'm not that active in Twitter and things like this. I occasionally am, but but if you want to get the notifications about what gets released, you should subscribe. Subscribe here. Um, what else? Um, okay. Oh yeah, you want to help? You do want to do? You can do it through patronage, through Patreon or Subscribe Star. I understand that. And the other thing you can do is if you want to want to directly, don't want to subscribe, you can just go buy my cop book, which is basically it's the notebook on Aristotle's politics, which again just be very useful as we go through this text. It's not a commentary; it's a study guide that helps you takes you through the politics. Um, I recommend it. It's a very useful guide in that sense. Um, and that should be it. You can buy that Lulu directly, or you can buy it through Amazon or other online bookstores. Okie dokie. It's only available as a book. It's not an ebook because the reason why it's not an ebook is because ebooks are usually UPEBs, and I have charts and images that just don't work. It becomes a mess, unreadable on this. This is actually very good, effective as a book. If it was PDF, it would work perfect, but it's not. They don't do most EPUBs and EPUB things don't do PDFs. Okie dokie. I'm going to stop here, and I'll let you go. Have a good day. Take care. Bye bye.